to do to share my slides with you. All right, you should all see my screen now. Okay, I hope you all see a screen with the title of today's talk, What We Talk About When We Talk About Open Access. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your patience as we got through these little issues. I'll try to respect everyone's time today and finish on time. We might run a little bit over, but I believe this is going to be recorded. So if you do miss some, you can come back and watch it later. Thank you again. So welcome and happy Open Access Week. My name is Miriam Fakori, and I recently started my position as Scholarly Publishing Outreach Librarian at the University of Washington, Seattle, which is a large research institution. Before I came here, I was at Columbia College, Chicago, which is an arts and media-focused institution with primarily undergraduates who pursue things like comedy writing and fashion and journalism and film production. Now, Columbia College may not be what you think about as an institution at the forefront of the open access movement, but there were a lot of opportunities to talk about open access there. I'm also an attorney, and all of these strands are going to come together today in today's webcast content. So I hope that no matter where you are and who you work with, this webcast will help you to reflect on your communication style and spark some ideas about how you can talk about open access. Here are the formal objectives for today's webcast. I want you to be able to define open access in your own words in order to explain it effectively to audiences and understand the rationales for and against open access in order to communicate the value of openness concisely and persuasively. And finally, I want you to know of a few examples of open access lessons and activities that you can adapt to your own presentations and classes. Our agenda looks a lot like the objectives. I'm going to ask you to define open access in your own words, so be ready for that. We'll cover the rationales for and against open access, and we'll see examples of open access in presentation and curricula. There are a couple of final points I'll share with you, and then we'll have discussion if time permits. So stay near your computers. There are a few polls in today's presentation, and this is the very first one. So please let the group know how you describe your position. And you can check more than one category if you operate in a variety of roles. And if your role is not listed here, you can tell us about yourself using the chat feature. Okay. All right, the poll has ended. Can we share the results now? All right. Oh, there they are. Great. Okay, we've got a nice mix here. A lot of scholarly communication, a lot of reference, subject liaisons, some administrators. Good. We've got a nice diverse group. We'll go into the second poll. I'd like to know what kind of distribution of workplaces we have represented. I know some of you already introduced yourselves and your institution while we were waiting for the sound issues to be resolved. If you wouldn't mind, please do so again. And this poll only lets you select one answer. And of course, you can use the chat feature if you don't see an adequate description of the kind of workplace where you are. So we'll just take a very short while for you to fill out this poll. Thank you. Thanks. Some are coming in via chat. Thank you for that. All right. So we have mostly higher education. A community college, great. Public library, terrific. All right, thank you all so much for that. I just wanted to get a sense of where we are as a group. So we're here to talk about talking, and it can be difficult sometimes to explain things. I want to play this video, which illustrates that very well. Sometimes the more we work with concepts, the harder it is to slow down and explain them. So this video shows some scientists who work extensively with p-values, and they're trying to explain what one is to the rest of us.
Can you explain what a p-value is in a sentence?
Well, I'd actually spent my entire career about the definition of p-value, but I cannot tell you what it means. Almost nobody can.
Hello, are you still with us? Okay. So it's not just scientists who have trouble explaining things. Every profession has its jargon, and we use words freely with our colleagues, but it's hard to simplify them into one or two sentences that anyone would understand sometimes. Simplicity sounds easy, but if it were, I wouldn't think about it so much. So what is open access? I want us all to be clear communicators about open access today, and I'm going to share some thoughts and strategies about that with you now. First, I want to acknowledge that each one of us has our own communication style, and let's explore that right now. If you could please enter your definition of open access in the chat feature, we'll share all of our communication styles with the group now. Let's take just a couple minutes to do this. It can be kind of hard. All right, thanks, Emily. Emily has shared a great definition. Yeah, Mike Roy, thank you for volunteering that. That's really short and to the point. I like it. Thanks for your honesty, Mike. Anybody else want to volunteer a really quick definition of open access? All right, we're running a little tight on time, so I'm just going to go right ahead. In fairness, I want to share my definition with you. Okay. Oops, sorry. This is my own personal definition, and when I'm in the moment talking to someone, I say something like this. I say something like open access is about free access to stuff. It's when Creators and researchers make their work available to anyone online at no cost. Now, I want to do better than this. And so that's one of the reasons why we're here today. When I was preparing for this webcast today, I came across this quote by Albert Einstein that I want to share with you, and that's, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. And this has become one of my new guideposts for communication. It's not easy to do this. So let's remember your definitions and let's add some nuance now. Let's talk about why open access matters. There's so much discourse about open access these days. I did a quick search for it recently and got 8,400,000 results in less than 1 second. So we're not going to have a comprehensive literature review of this ongoing conversation now. We're going to talk about some common themes and think about some case studies around open access. There are a lot of rationales for open access, and this is an incomplete list. A lot of these, I'm sure, are familiar to you. There are several rationales here at the top that point to making the world a more equitable place. People talk about fairness. Why should some people have access to scholarship, but not other people? There's also a very moral stance when we talk about open access. People believe that if we have sound research, we have a moral obligation to share it so that we can advance human knowledge. And people also talk about equitable access as a social justice. And equal access to scholarship is just one step toward a more just society where everyone has an equal chance. People also talk about open access as a public service. So sharing research is a way to enrich public life and give back to a society that has given us quite a bit to begin with. And a related rationale is public mandates for taxpayer-funded research. Government issues put this qualifier when they give funding money. They say you must make the results of your research public. Shouldn't we have access to the research that our tax money pays for through those research grants? There's a strong rationale when we talk about economics and what we call the serials crisis. As librarians are well aware, serials cost more and more over time, taking a larger portion of libraries' overall budget. And on top of this is that we often subscribe to these serials through bundle deals where libraries must pay for large sets of publications that they may or may not want in order to get the publications that they really truly want. You know, it's like cable TV where you might have 400 channels in your package, but you only really watch 4. And on top of that, the licensing terms might be restrictive. Does your agreement with a database vendor allow your patrons to use the content in the ways that they really need to? One example of this is the Harvard Business Review. It's notable as a peculiarly restrictive license that limits the way professors can share articles with their students. There are reputational interests involved. Researchers gain visibility for their work if it's online for everyone to access. There's also reproducibility, which is related to transparency. Researchers can see and comment on each other's working methods. And finally, preservation and archiving. The advocates of open access like the idea of scholarly literature being maintained by educational institutions and not businesses. So in this poll, I'd like you all to volunteer which rationales for open access resonate the most with you. Many people feel very, very strongly about openness and are very excited to talk about it. I've merged the previous slide into 5 rough categories, and you can select more than one answer in this poll, and you can also enter additional answers in the chat field. So it's important to acknowledge our core values. So please share with the group what it is about open access that really excites you. All right, has everyone had enough time for that poll now? Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. All right, thanks. All right, so the poll has been closed. We're just waiting to see the survey results. Well, yeah, a lot of people are very passionate about improving society, as well as the business and economics of scholarly publishing, transparency. So we have a little bit of everything. Yeah, these are all great rationales for openness. Thank you for sharing. So it's important to know our individual motivations and be honest with ourselves. Because when we talk about why we believe in open access, we're authentic. It can be scary sometimes to show our authentic times, but it's also very liberating because we're true to ourselves when we talk about our true core values. But not everyone thinks the same way, so we have to step out of our comfort zones and adapt our styles a little bit. And I hope that the next few slides will challenge you and help you be more confident and persuasive in talking about open access with other people. Because I'm an attorney, I look at counter-arguments, and here are common rationales that oppose open access. You've probably seen these before as well. The total costs of publishing are the same, they're just shifted around, so who's going to pay the processing fees? Open access journals are lower quality. Open access publications lack status for hiring, promotion, and tenure. And it takes extra time and effort to prepare work for the public because researchers have to write for a general audience. The public doesn't have the expertise to understand the scholarly literature anyway. Commercial publishers may be more innovative than universities, and they bring added value like copy editing, design, and marketing. And what about those learned societies? They might lose valuable revenue from lost subscriptions. And journal costs vary by discipline, so why should authors who publish in lower cost journals have to publish openly? And there's always interlibrary loans. Now these claims have merit, and they're also subject for further discussion. So let's bring all this together and talk about open access conversations with our stakeholders. So remember your different definitions of open access, and remember the rationale for and against open access on the previous slides, and remember your true self. Let's put all these things together now and think how to craft our messages. To make things even a little bit more challenging, open access conversations are so contextual. I'm going to introduce you to 5 stakeholders now. Let's consider each of their outlooks and concerns and think how we'd have a conversation with each of them about open access. Now, since this is a webcast, we can't actually talk with them or with each other, so please listen actively and think how you would talk with each of these. And if you wish to share your thoughts through the chat box, please do so. This is Anne, my childhood friend. She's a medical doctor now, and she specializes in allergies and immunology. She was a researcher earlier in her career. Now she practices at a mid-sized clinic. And it's a good clinic, but it's not large enough to have an expensive medical library, and it's not affiliated with any university. Anne and I met for dinner a couple months ago, and we were talking about my new job. And when I mentioned open access, Anne said, "Oh, you mean when I look up an article online and I get a screen that says I have to pay to read the whole thing?" And I said, "That's exactly what I'm talking about." Anne is an example of a member of the public who has need for scholarly literature and the background to understand it. So let's just think about what further talking points we have when we talk to Anne about open access. This is John. He's a junior in high school now, and he's Anne's son. Now, the men in Anne's family are pretty outdoorsy, They like to go fishing together and do other activities outside. So when John had to think of a science project recently for school, he started thinking of changes in the fish populations in nearby waterways. And John needs images as well as information about this topic for his school project. So let's think how we would explain open access to John and what questions John might ask you about open access. John's an example of many things. He's definitely a digital native. He's a future college student and a potential future scientist. He's also a member of the public with a genuine interest in a research topic, but he doesn't yet have extensive training in it. He's a curious teenager. So this is a great time to talk with John about open access. He's a little bit under pressure. He's got an assignment he needs to do some research for, as well as find some images he can use in his project. And beyond that, he's preparing for college in general. And I want to include John here for several reasons. Not all K through 12 students have librarians in their schools. So the libraries and the research process generally can be an intimidating mystery to many young people. And we know that many students start and end their research online, and we don't know how thoroughly they vet their search results. We want John and his peers to be knowledgeable and critical consumers of information. And so in library terminology, we want them to be what we call information literate. And understanding something about scholarly communication is part of information literacy. And as we in ACRL know, the ACRL cares about information literacy a great deal and has a lot of guidance to offer us there. It's never too early to talk to young people about open access and publishing in ways that they can understand, because we want them to be really critical researchers and consumers of information, not just for school, but in their lives ahead. This is Casey. He's a bike guy. When I moved to Seattle recently, I shipped my bike, and Casey put it together for me when I got here. Casey's a highly respected bike fixer, and he's been in business a long time. And when I was in his shop, he asked me what brought me to Seattle, and I told him I got a new job at the university in the libraries. And he said, "Oh, does it smell like books?" Now, we've all had conversations like this. Many people don't know what librarians do or why we're needed. But Casey and I continued to talk, and I tried to explain open access to him. And it was really difficult for Casey to accept that publishers don't pay academic researchers for their articles. As a small independent business owner, Casey has to be paid for his time and expertise, or he'll go out of business. He also needs to know about his market. Casey's a member of a specialized community. He's a known bike expert, and as we talk more, he told me about studies about how car exhaust affects bikers. He told me about road conditions in Seattle and how the city's geography and weather conditions matter to people on bikes. So Casey's an example of a member of the public who doesn't read peer-reviewed research per se, but he knows a lot about his specialty. Casey would know when a claim about biking just doesn't ring true, and he's also a small business entrepreneur in a niche market. And we can draw upon all of these threads when we talk to Casey about open access. This is Adam. He's an attorney. He's very respected, and he often represents creators in intellectual property disputes. His clients include photographers, writers, and musicians who believe their work was taken and exploited unfairly by large industry players with more power than they have. Now, Adam's clients need permissions, fees, and royalties to survive, and Adam helps them. He's really forthright about his views, too. He believes very strongly in private property rights, and he's critical of fair use claims. And he's skeptical of this whole movement toward free content sharing. So how could we talk with Adam about open access? In some ways, it's more straightforward to have a conversation with Adam than with other stakeholders. Adam knows the law very well, so you can start the conversation at a different level. You don't have to explain copyright law or contractual issues to him. He understands that. And he also understands economic interests very well. Adam's an example of someone who believes very strongly in exclusive property rights and is skeptical about the Creative Commons and other sharing models. But let's keep an open mind about him. I don't see him ever becoming an open access activist, but he's a good listener, he's objective, and he's a reasonable person. He's a skilled attorney, and he would be very beneficial to have a resource, as a resource. This is Stephanie. She's a young sociology professor starting a new job. She knows all about p-values, and she's interested in copyright, the publishing process, and the resources at her university that will help her advance in her work and her career. She's interested in the idea of open access, and she wants to learn more about it, but she has a slight hesitation. How might you talk with Stephanie about open access? Now, Stephanie's kind of the classic example of an early career academic in the social sciences. She has a solid working knowledge of copyright and the open movement, and especially because she's new, this is a great opportunity to reach out to her about library services. We want to build relationships with people just like Stephanie. Even if she doesn't publish in open access journals at the outset of her career, she may be an open access advocate later on and a great role model for other faculty and graduate students. Time for another activity that I wish we could do in person. Athletes practice and they drill, performers rehearse. So we're going to do the same thing by having a practice conversation about open access. Now, if we were all together physically, I'd say find a partner, find a space, and do some role playing. One of you would be a character who's an open access novice or skeptic, and another one would be an open access advocate. And I want the skeptics to raise as many concerns as they can that apply to their role. And I'd want the advocates to address their concerns concisely and persuasively, and just talk and be messy and just practice articulating your point of view with your partner. So we can't do that in person, but two of my colleagues, Madison Sullivan and Elliot Stevens, recently sat down to do just that. And I want to play you a recording of their conversation. It's about 4 minutes long. And you'll notice that there was absolutely no post-production on this recording, so it's a little bit rough in parts. And this is the first take director's cut. I deliberately left it that way because I wanted to include everything as it happened, because the whole point of this is that this is a practice conversation. It doesn't have to be polished. So I'm going to play that for you right now.
Sullivan and Elliot Stevens, they're going to role play a conversation now. Madison, who are you playing in this scenario?
So I'm playing a professor who knows a little bit about open access, but has a little bit of trepidation about, well, how would I actually do this? Isn't opposed to open access, but is a little confused.
Okay, and Elliot?
I'm a librarian who's trying to answer Madison's questions and advice.
All right, so we're just going to talk right now.
Okay. So, Elliot, I'm wondering what are some of the reasons why I would want to publish open access versus, maybe in a reputable journal that's behind a paywall?
So I think one thing is publishing in open access doesn't mean that you won't be trying to publish things in other journals. I think you'll make it a part of the way you publish. So you'll still focus on the journals that are reputable in your field and maybe tied to a tenure track process, but you might want to.
Oops. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about this. Oh, no. I apologize, everyone. I'll try to get back where we were.
Completely. I'm wondering what are some of the reasons why I would want to publish open access versus, maybe in a reputable journal that's behind a paywall?
Well, I think one thing is publishing in open access doesn't mean that you won't be trying to publish things in other journals. I think you'll make it a part of the way you publish, and so you'll still focus on the journals that are reputable in your field and maybe tied to a tenure track process, but you might want to consider publishing in open access journals because it's a question of access. It's a question of who gets to read things and who often is prevented from reading articles because they're just so expensive. People having to pay $30 or $60 to read an article instead of having it open and free to read.
So if I published in an open access publication, do you think it would hold as much weight as something published in maybe like one of the top journals in my field? How would that look to my promotion and tenure committee?
Well, I think that is going to probably go from department to department and committee to committee, because certainly there are open access journals that are, quote unquote, reputable and have an impact on the field, and there are going to be other journals that don't really have much. So I think, again, there's no one way to answer that question. I think it's another thing is to see in your department, what is the conversation about open access journals? Does your department value it, or do they not value it at all? If they don't value it, then it really isn't something you're taking on yourself, almost as a kind of advocacy to say, this is important to me, and I want to be read in a certain way, even if it isn't something that's valued by my department or my discipline. So again, I think it's just to see what are the conversations happening in your department about these ways of publishing.
So I'm wondering then if it's probably just similar to if you would publish even non-open access, right? Like there are some good journals, there are some not so great journals, right? So it's probably the same thing with open access, I would guess.
Yeah, I think there's no way to, you wouldn't want to generalize and say that there's so many open access journals that are predatory and that are taking advantage, or they're not always beyond reproach either. So I think it's, again, something that has to be weighed, or just to see as a department, like how, are things like altmetrics valued? Is writing for the public something that's valued, or is it completely not at all important?
So if I did want to publish open access, is it going to cost me anything? Because I don't see how it's like a sustainable model, because publishing does cost, right? So how does that work?
You're right. Again, I think this is what publishers do think of themselves as adding value through things like editing and production costs and presentation. So I think, again, there are no easy answers, I think, when it comes to open access. And some people who publish in open access journals, they're paying lots of money to be published, to have their work in such a journal. So I think, again, it's just when we have conversations, we'll always have to talk about, it'll be based on the specific journal or what you want to get out of it or why it's important to you. I feel like I'm not answering any of your questions, but that's just it, I think, about open access, is that we have to talk about this stuff, because when we say open access, it doesn't mean one thing.
All right, so you could hear the director's cut there of our conversation, and they were such great sports. Madison got right to the point, and she asked some pretty tough questions, and Elliot listened to Madison's concerns, and he addressed them head-on and honestly based upon what he knows of her hypothetical situation. And I recommend having similar practice conversations with your friends and colleagues, just like we did here last week. So now it's time to look beyond those one-on-one conversations and see examples of open access activities that you can adapt for your presentations and classes. There are a range here. Some are really quick 5-minute things, if that's all the time you have, and others are longer-term projects that do require some planning and collaboration. So activity number 1 is to simply look up the prices of journal subscriptions or textbooks, and I know many of you already do this now. I like this idea because it's quick and it's active and it gets right to the matter at hand. So give your audience a few journal or textbook titles and publisher websites and ask them to look up the cost of the publication. STEM fields, as we know, are great for this. Things like ferroelectrics or neuroscience and chemistry. And Taylor and Francis is an easy website to navigate to find this information. They make it really easy to find. Just start at their home page, and then you'll click on journals, and you'll see an option that says journal price lists. You'll get to a big PDF spreadsheet of all their titles and the subscription costs. I even tested this out on my mobile phone, and it was very easy to do. So you can adapt this exercise, for anywhere you've got internet access. You can have your friends look up journal subscription prices when you meet them at your favorite cafe or bar or wherever you have an open access conversation. Activity number 2 is another really, really fast thing to do. I like it because it's visual. And I've put this in a number of presentations I've given for faculty, students, and staff. Just show your audience a diagram of all the decisions that they have to make if they want to use work that's protected by copyright. And here's one example. There are many other decision trees online that you can use, or you can make your own. And each step in the decision tree is a multi-factor inquiry. And we know that especially number 3, has the copyright expired? That can be a whole, lot of work to figure that out. And step number 5, is your use likely fair use? That can be in a whole entire separate analysis that we have to do. And those aren't easy questions to answer. So if your audience is informed enough to know how difficult it is to work through this decision tree, I would hope that using something with a Creative Commons license is attractive to them because they can just avoid all of the other decisions that they have to make. Activity number 3, this takes a little more time and planning and coordination with an instructor. You can give students an explanation of how open access resources are different from others that they find online, and then give them an assignment that requires third-party content. When I was at Columbia College Chicago, a colleague and I worked with a digital media arts class. At the beginning of the semester, I gave them a presentation about copyright and the Creative Commons. And then for their final project, they had to create an art piece that drew from materials licensed with CC licenses. And at the very end of the semester, we displayed their work in the library. And I wanted to share this with you because students in creative fields need the commons as well, and especially for images and music. And music copyright is so complicated. I would urge them all to use things with Creative Commons licenses. And of course, this works just as well with text-based assignments. They can do research using only open access journals. And open access activity 4 is to create or facilitate an open educational resource. So if you have time and resources, you can facilitate open educational resources on your campus. And remember that this can be something other than a text. At North Carolina State University, instructors got some grants to create open educational resources. And these are some still shots from one of those resulting projects. One of the professors there teaches organic chemistry, and her students created short videos that illustrate basic lab techniques and safety features in the lab. And these are very practical short videos. They're easy to understand. I looked at a few of them without having a background in the hard sciences, and I thought that they would help me out if I were a student in an introductory chemistry lab. Here's another activity that you can do. It's a little bit more involved. and that is to interview open researchers on your campus and share their thoughts. So today we're spending a lot of time thinking of how we as librarians can be advocates for openness, but sometimes the best tactic is to let others share the stage and let faculty talk to their peers and their students. My colleague here, Verletta Kern, is giving a platform to researchers at the University of Washington who have open working methods. She interviewed a number of open researchers in the University of Washington system, and she published their interviews online and in posters around campus for this week, for Open Access Week. And here's just one snippet of one interview from a blog post that came out of this project. And these open access interviews yielded a lot of really great information. The researchers talked about their work methods. They described their projects in detail. And they also came out with a lot of motivational quotes. Many of the interviewees talked about getting feedback on their work directly from many professional peers all around the world. They also spoke about their desires to connect their work with people outside of academia. And they also talked about fairness of access to research. Now, I will tell you that Verletta had a bit of grant money for production costs, and she worked with a designer and a photographer so that everything looks really, really professional in the photographs and the visuals involved. But you could adapt this project for a smaller budget as well. You'd need, of course, a digital camera and a bit of design know-how and, of course, researchers to interview. But I think it's scalable in other environments. So those are 5 examples of activities that you might be able to adapt on your campuses with your community. So some final thoughts I want to share with you are to model best practices by using and citing open access resources, and create a list of open access media that faculty and students can use. And remember those creative media like music, photos, and videos. Students need those as much as they need text sometimes. And include citation guidelines for that open access content. Students are told so many times to cite absolutely everything that they might be ambivalent to use something that's from the Creative Commons, for example, if they don't know how to cite it. So remove that little mystery for them, and then that's one fewer barrier to using open access content. So this is us. Let's lead by example. Let's talk the talk. Let's walk the walk. And let's fly the flight. Here's a very quick list of resources. And remember that slide earlier with over 8 million results about open access. This is not that list. These are just a few of my favorite places to go for information and content that is open. Starting with the ACRL, which produced this webcast today, and they have a professional roadshow development series. And as full disclosure, I do coordinate the roadshow about the intersection of scholarly communication and information literacy, which I mentioned earlier when I was talking about John, the high school student. So scholarly communication as a part of information literacy is something that I think about a lot. If you're interested in the roadshow series, you can find more about it online. Spark is another great resource, and they have an Open Access Week toolkit. Peter Suber is a guru of all things open, and he has these 2 open books online that you can read. I go to the Creative Commons a lot for a lot of content, especially music, which is down below on this list. Directory of Open Access Journals, and Sherpa Romeo shares publisher policies about openness. Flickr is great for photos. I use it a lot, and it's a little harder to find stock videos. If you know places to find video content online, please tell me. Those are harder. But there is this website called Pexels where you can get, they're stock videos, but the production quality looks good if you ever need video to spice up a presentation. So before we open up the discussion, I want to send special thanks out to ACRL and a number of other people who helped with today's presentation, especially you. Thank you for your patience at the outset, and for spending an hour of Open Access Week with us today and contributing to our conversation. And I know that we're at our previously scheduled end time, but we can spend a little longer online today if you're able to and have a discussion. So if you have any points you want to bring up via the chat feature, please do so now. And thank you again. Happy Open Access Week. And my colleague John Watts has pushed out a link with a little more information about the ACRL professional development roadshows, if that is something that you're interested in. Any questions or case studies anybody wants to share? No questions are coming in? Well, thank you all for joining us. And okay, thank you, Eloise. Yes, the recording will be available later. Yes, of course. The presentation will be online. You can watch it whenever you like. And Eloise says it will be ready on Friday. Thank you all so much for joining us.